Earl, appreciate your willingness to serve. We're doing a little change up today because I got a text from Rose and she said, I'm ready to go home, so. So we'll do the announcements and choruses and prayer requests afterwards. So if you'd. This morning, I decided to give the folks in the back a reprieve. Last week they had 49 verses or 39. This week they have 3. So, but you know how it is studying the Word of God. Sometimes it only takes a verse or two to get a lot out of it, because there's so much meaning and content within so much of the Word of God. Not all of us reading genealogy and how tents are assembled and things like that, but and even those things, there's usually more content there than we realize through all the symbolism and stuff. What I want to speak about this morning is basically the sacredness of life. And I think it's the lack of sacredness of life of our society leads to many of our woes and problems that we have on just a lot of different levels. And I'm going to start out with 2 verses from Genesis. Very simple verses, but profound in their implication as far as who is sovereign, who has the authority over life, and who decides to give life and to take it away. The first one is Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created him. Now within this verse establishes that there is something very special about mankind. Something that is different than all the other animals of creation, something that is very special in the sense that we are given something. There's something within the nature of man that is godlike, and I've heard different debates about what it is, but we didn't lose it in the fall. Some people might say, because we were told in later times that not to take a vow on your head because you're made in the image of God. So we're still in the image of God. We didn't lose it in the fall. And I do believe that within man is the ability, if he so chooses, to become a son of God. And it's a free will choice, but that is there. And that is the reason why life is sacred. Because, well, first God said it was, but it is not anyone else's within their sovereign authority to decide to take a life or not to take a life unless it's contained within scriptures. The other verse is Genesis 9:6. Whosoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. Now, God established certain rules of order of when life can be taken and when not life is taken. And these are very important to understand that God created civil authorities within our culture for a purpose. Basically to prevent anarchy, lawlessness, and I believe that, life on earth is almost like a petri dish. It's like God made the world for a purpose, and, a lot of mankind lives their existence much as animals do, and they even act like animals a lot of times, and they are destroyed. But throughout the history of time, there has always been this remnant of people who have sought after God as Paul says in Acts 17, the purpose of man is that we should seek after God and find him. And that's God's will. And it gives a divine purpose for all things. So there are a number of things within our society that has had a profound effect on our thinking. I don't know what happened back before the flood. Obviously, there were a number of things that affected mankind's thinking then too. I guess the primary thing is the same things that tempt all men, but it's basically the propensity of man to follow the desires of the flesh, pride and those kinds of things. But one of the things that happened was the thought of Darwinism. Basically, Darwinism is a theory of biological evolution developed by Charles Darwin and others. It's been kind of amended and appended as time has gone on, and not everybody agrees, but they sure don't want to, those who embrace it don't want to go the other way, because that's just a life of slavery to them. It states that all species of organisms arise and develop through the natural selection of small inherited variations that increase the individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce. He published his book, Origin of Species, in 1859. And a lot of times if you start quoting things with Darwin, they say, well, we don't believe that, we've gone on from there. And I guess they truly believe in evolution. I believe in evolution, but within God's parameters, evolution within species. And I'm not, my purpose is not to prove or disprove that here, but my faith is in God and it's not in man's philosophy and thinking. Though the term usually refers to strictly biological evolution, the theory of evolution in essence, it finds a replacement in the origin of life, as we find recorded in the book of Genesis. In other words, by nature, the theory rejects God as the creator, and it changes it. And because they reject God, they change the whole value of human life. The influences of the sacred scriptures on our society have been there. It is why we haven't quite there got yet, but the value of animal life is getting pretty close to what human life is. And in some instances, it's worth even more. We could cite a few, but we're evolving truly in our thinking. But the inference is that mankind is a result of an accidental, formation of certain elements, and it's like and therefore, because of that, there's nothing sacred about mankind over any other species of animal. So this came in the middle 19th century. There were other thought before that, but with the publication of Darwin's book, it just kind of spread worldwide like wildfire. I've got a lot of publications from the 1870s, some books and things like that, that talk about it, and it was pretty well accepted with all amongst the intellectuals and that, and I think a lot of people were looking for an excuse to reject the scriptures and God. But through this idea of the value of humankind, society can suddenly, they can determine, who lives and who dies, because our society and our people our society decides that's the highest authority there is. There is no higher authority in their mindset. And therefore, to societal decision, they can decide who lives and dies, especially in the early 70s when we had Roe versus Wade. The Supreme Court decided that a woman has the right to basically devalue the life that's contained within her body, and that she has the right to take that life. That's a direct result from that decision. You know, the horrors of, you hear about the horrors of Nazi Germany and the values that we see there upon different classes of people or groups of people. In a lot of respects, it's become very normal today. I think a lot of society just doesn't realize it. It's the same mindset, it's the same value system that has been put onto the unborn. You know, we kill our own children if we decide they're not wanted. It's a pretty profound thing. I think that a lot of cultures of years ago would just be amazed at what we do now. There are many countries, especially European countries, that they practice euthanasia for those that are aged and infirm, alien of different diseases. They decide whether you have an acceptable level of quality of life, and so they make the decision. Even just recently, there are certain things that have been they're instituting life counselors within our health care system as we speak for these purposes. I think another example that has had a big influence on society as a whole is the slave trade that went on for some 400 years in the Americas, and it continues today in the Eastern Hemisphere. But I came across some old documents. These are these books that I came across. Found them at an auction. But they are the 1860 records of congressional proceedings. And basically it gives all the debate and everything that's going on in Congress at the time. Very, very interesting. I mean, I can spend hours just sitting reading this stuff. But a lot of it in 1860 particularly, there's a lot of debate because if you remember in April of 61, that's when the Civil War started. The Portuguese are the ones that brought slavery to the New World. In the early 1500s, they came and they began taking the indigenous people of Brazil and made them slaves, and they had them. They started with sugar, and then they started into mines, but they found out that these native people were not as their stamina wasn't for all the hard work that they had them do. So they turned to Africa, and by the 1550s and that, they had the market for slavery from Western Africa was in full swing, and they would go to a lot of the local tribal kingdoms within that and buy the people off of the slavers from that region. In fact, in doing some of the research, I didn't realize that Brazil itself used more of the slaves, used over 40% of all the slaves that were brought over from Africa. And they become there, if you look on a map, there's West Africa and Brazil, this part of South America, so they became kind of a triangle. And a lot of slaves, the large portion of the slaves were brought into Brazil, then marketed into the United States and the colonies and that, beginning in the 16th century and on up until the Civil War. But, slavery, Brazil was also the last country to do away with slavery in 1888. With that background, I wanted to read a little excerpt from some of the proceedings. And the abolitionists of the day, which the abolitionists were a pretty strong force within the United States, within the colonies and the states at that time. Probably more profound than we realize, especially in the northern states. But this is Mr. Wilson. He's a congressman. He's speaking before Congress, and he's addressing the president I'm not sure if this is the Senate or if this is this is the House. But anyway, I'm just going to read through this, and I think it. And as I read through this, I thought that, you could be saying the same thing about other lives that, as I was speaking of, as a portion of that. But let me read it. It says, Mr. President, the general voice of Christendom pronounced the African slave trade a crime against humanity. It is war, devastation, bloodshed, tears, agony, death. Its appalling horrors upon the land, its tortures and torments upon seas glare upon the nations. The human imagination cannot conceive, nor the human intellect comprehend the nameless woes, the sumless agonies during the hapless children of Africa, by the hapless children of Africa. Through 4 centuries of this hideous traffic in the muscles and bones of men, and now in light of the 19th century, this traffic in humanity, which Jefferson branded inextricable commerce, a piratical warfare, and cruel war upon human nature itself. Now, where Jefferson said this was in the first draft of the Constitution. We know that Jefferson kept slaves, but, I think, well, I don't want to get into that because it can get quite extended, but Jefferson was not for slavery. In fact, a lot of people were not for slavery. It was part of the culture, and there was a vast difference in the type of masters that there were at that time. And it wasn't until the cotton trade became that a lot of the slaves were brought into the South. And Webster pronounced inhuman and accursed stands, let's see, no, I skipped a part here, which Madison stigmatized as infernal, and Webster pronounced inhuman and accursed, stands revealed to the gaze of mankind in all its loathsome and revolting aspects. Civilized man pronounced this traffic piracy, and the slave trader a pirate and a felon, an offender far beyond the ordinary depths of human guilt. Now, really what's going on here is slave trade had become outlawed. There was an agreement amongst the nations that they could no longer bring slaves over from Africa, but the American ships were bringing them over. The American ships, the slave traders, had steam-powered boats. And the American naval forces were ignoring what was going on. In fact, they didn't have the equipment to chase them down because they just had sails. They couldn't keep up with them. Yet in this age, illumined by the lights of the Christian civilization, this abhorred traffic flourishes in defiant mockery of laws, the sentiments and opinions of the civilized world. To America belongs the glory of having led the nations in their effort to suppress this odious and polluted traffic. But in their work of inhumanity, which now stains and dishonors the age, American citizens lusting for gold, though it be soiled by the blood and tears and enacting guilty deeds which bring dishonor and shame upon the American name. What he's saying there is, even though America led in stopping the slave trade from Africa, in other words, they did allow people who had slaves to keep them, but they had stopped, they recognized it as piracy. But here America is, because for the lust of the profits of slavery is ignoring it. They are ignoring the rule of law. Sound familiar? They're ignoring the rule of law so that they can do profitable enterprises. American avarice in defense of law is now reviving and renewing vigor in a traffic which is rekindled anew on the coast of Africa, the fierceness of savage warfare, and adding new and fiercer passions to the contests of barbarism. American ships, chartered by American citizens, manned by American seamen, furnishing with the instruments of misery and torture, manacles and fetters, forged by American artisans and hovering on the American waters for human cargoes or floating upon the seas, freighted with the cargoes of despair, with anguish, suffering, and death. The American flag is prostituted to cover this loathsome commerce by American citizens who should rather pour out their hearts' blood to save that flag from such pollution and dishonor. American Christians, in shameless defiance of the moral sense of mankind and the laws of their country, greedily clutch the surviving victims of this lawless and piratical traffic and doom them in this Christian land to perpetual bondage. American juries, regardless alike of the laws of the country, of their own sworn obligations, refuse to indict and convict the audacious pirate and felon engaged in this work of hell, foul and dark. Notice the similarities. The judicial system of the country has chose to look the other way and not to interpret the rule of law as is written. With some of the recent Supreme Court decisions and also, some of the things we've heard on recently concerning Planned Parenthood and the things going on there, and there should be a rising up that just does not tolerate that. But that's what's going on here, and because it's the Americans are profiting to monetary means from this, so the Christians themselves, what he's saying here is people who call themselves Christians are shamelessly doing this. And really isn't much different than today. People who call them Christians participate in all these others. It's amazing how many Christians feel that the Supreme Court, that was a fine decision. We need to live and let live. We can't make people be as we are. It's unfortunate. I think most of us are familiar what is found in our Declaration of Independence. There certainly was a consciousness of the right of individuals, of all mankind, as as you read in the opening statements. And I think most of you all are familiar with this, but in the opening paragraph, it mentions that the law of nature is, the nature that God entitles us with. But the second paragraph, he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator and certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men to deriving their past powers from the consent of the governed. And then in the very closing paragraph, it says, and for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. You know, within this document, it recognized that there is a sovereign God. And the reason it is so important, and one of the reasons why it's such a profound document, is because it was a different approach to governing of a people. We benefit from a unique idea, I guess, amongst man's ideas of how government should be run. Unfortunate that we very often break those ideas and don't follow it as was originally drafted. But what this document does is it recognizes that God gave people, there are underlying rights within us that God gives us. It comes naturally to us. And for instance, within the commandments, when someone does something against us, whether they lie to us or they steal from us, they are breaking those underlying principles. That's really, it's what it's, you know, in a lot of it's okay to have a statue as long as your book doesn't have any words on it. You know, I think above the Supreme Court, there's supposed to be Moses holding a book, but there's no words, so it's okay to have that up there. But if you have some kind of Ten Commandments in a courthouse, that's against the law, because well, that's what they've decided anyway. When we disregard these natural laws that are established, you know, in the Word of God, everything becomes complicated. Life becomes oppressive and contentious. Society is devolved. It's not in mankind's disposition to rule himself without a foundation of God's law that He has given mankind. And without it, we follow the theory of what is the third rule of relativity? I forget how it is, but anyway, everything devolves, everything corrupts, everything goes down, and that is the nature of the sinful man. Without God, we're nothing. Without God's rule, anarchy reigns, and it becomes more and more so. I must be missing a page here. Well, there's one other thing that I wanted to mention here, and that is socialism, as in atheistic socialism. There's a lot of different brands of socialism, but basically Marxism, communism, those things, their nature, they are inherently atheistic, because they put their faith in mankind to basically pull themselves up by the bootstraps. And even though we've seen the results of communism, which embraced the teaching of Karl Marx and his manifesto, we have seen within China alone, they say 30 million people. Under Stalin, another at least 25, 30 million. And, you know, there's just a long list of experiments within society that just failed time after time again. Yet today, in this country, this ideologue, this idea that man can do this is becoming more popular all the time. What we're seeing in our political realm of ideas is being embraced more and more a bad idea of where God is rejected. And I think a lot of these people pretend to be Christian or moral, but in reality they're not, because they can't if they embrace these. But Marxism is still being embraced. It's a modified flavor, and in Europe they've got another flavor and that, but it's still, the core value is excludes God. And but they're all atheistic at the core. And I find one of the problems that we have as people who believe in God is that the debate becomes pitched towards those who embrace that because they have no core values. So they can lie to you, they can use any kind of means to persuade people to their way of thinking because they have no ethical standards. And I guess it's probably always that way, but they don't have to worry about bearing false witness, or they don't have to love their enemies. Anyway, I guess I just bring that out because as God's people, we live by a rule of rules of order. They're not founded on the philosophies of man. Our determination of social justice is not man's philosophies. And the social justice that we see, that's a phrase that's coined from Marxism, goes all the way back to Marx. Whenever it's employed, society crumbles, and men reap the results of it. So any form of government and its people that disregard the sovereignty of God and his precepts become more troubled, and the people suffer for it. From slavery, we inherited the results of a civil war that killed, they figure about 500,000 people from each side. And that's 1 million people from a population that was, I don't know what it was, 35 million or something, I'm not sure. And even today, we wrestle with the unrest, and I think it's largely it's resentment. That is still harbored today. 5 decades after abortion was made legal, which is a denial of God, a God-given sanctity of life, we've grown into a culture of death. And in this, we appease the unwillingness, I think, for people to be accountable for their actions. And it's a callous disregard for the weakest and most defenseless among us, the unborn. And, if we defy God and in that we defy the natural passion given to women for their offspring. It's just amazing. And from the pseudoscience of evolution and the atheistic liberalism that denies the very existence of God, the world is preparing the hordes of people for the judgment of God. It's sad to see, but as God's people, we look forward to the return of Christ, of the Savior. And it should grieve us to realize that there are so many people who really reap the results of that faith. But I think that regardless of those depressing facts and those depressing things, that we know the end of the story. But we do know also that God's a merciful God, and it's His will that all be saved. And we should never give up on wanting to reach out for those, the unfortunate, and the ignorant, those that don't know God. I want to close in Proverbs 24:11 and 12. It says, "Deliver those who are drawn toward death." "And hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, 'Surely we did not know this,' does not He who weighs the hearts consider it? He who keeps your soul, does He know it? And will He not render to each man according to his deeds?" God bless you.